Cece, we have an exciting announcement, but maybe we need to back it up a little bit for people who maybe don't remember or need some refreshers of what was going on in Colorado just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. In Colorado, we had these pastors from several different churches that were simply doing what they believe is their biblical mandate of reaching out to the less fortunate and feeding them. And so they were at this picnic place, and they would feed the homeless every Tuesday. They did this for 4 years at the park with no problems. But then the city decides, and they literally said this, they're going to crack down on this ministry. And so they pass a law that prohibits and it bans reoccurring gatherings of groups of 5 or more, which at a park is absolutely ridiculous because that's exactly who you have coming to use the park, whether it's an exercise group that meets every Monday, a singles group that meets on Wednesday nights, whatever. The park is used for those things, but they were literally going to crack down on this particular Christian use of the park. And so they literally arrested 3 pastors for feeding the poor under this law. And we immediately jumped in and defended them. Right. And we filed a motion to dismiss immediately. And when the prosecutor had tried to delay, had some delay tactics, but on the day that they were to file their opposition to our motion to dismiss, the prosecutor dropped the charges against these pastors.
They felt the pressure. They knew what was coming.
Well, and Logan, what I think is so interesting, especially on today, when we've been talking about what's happening in Minnesota, and you saw the response from Don Lemon. What a lot of, I feel like, unfortunately, the world thinks about churches is that they are white supremacists that only want to help themselves and ignore the good work that churches are doing, that evangelical churches do in their community around the world with disaster relief. But once again, this was a city that decided they didn't like the churches ministering to people in their community, to the least of these. And so they tried to make a law against it. They tried to do it in a clever way where it wouldn't appear as on the nose as churches can't help the poor. But it was this convoluted, you can't have more than 5 gathering on a recurring basis at a public park. They tried to limit who could use the public park. And then they went so far as to criminally cite these pastors. And we have been talking about this. We also mentioned that they had a hearing for their arraignment right before Christmas, when these pastors should have been focused on sharing the gospel, ministering to the community even more during the Christmas season. Just days before Christmas, there was an arraignment hearing that the prosecutor sought for it to be delayed, and it was. Even over the objections of our attorneys saying, no, let's have the arraignment now. And now we have secured victory. They have dropped these charges. But the fight's not over.
No, it's not over.
Because we have a civil component as well.
Yes, we've also filed in federal court against this law itself that it's viewpoint discrimination, and it is. And the Supreme Court has ruled on this, that the government can't shut down speech because of its Christianity. And that's what they're trying to do here, and that's what this law does. So we will continue to fight the law. And if we win on that, we win that for, again, not just our clients, but pastors and churches in that area that want to do the same kind of ministry.
You got to understand that when you're listening to these individual cases, you may be able to kind of disconnect yourself from it, but the implications, whether it's citywide, statewide, countrywide, is why ACLJ gets involved. I mean, obviously we want to help out the individual church. We want to make sure that they're protected, and we will do that. But there's always these global ramifications, or at least countrywide or statewide ramifications that then protect the next church that could run into this issue. That's why sometimes these make it to the Supreme Court of the United States. A lot of them have been handled already, but still you have state and local governments that don't understand the law. We have to jump in and help. And of course we help all of these churches at no cost to them. That is how the ACLJ operates. None of our clients pay a single dollar. Understand that. When they have anything that has to do with the law in terms of what we do here at the ACLJ, they're not being charged. Our legal teams fly there. They do all of that work. They make sure everything is handled without taking a penny from the client. But that is only because people like you stand up and say, I think this is important. Because likely this church that was meeting in a public park that was helping feed the homeless, They likely did not have the funds to pay for a top-notch legal staff to take this to court and to continue the case forward. But because people like you step up, even with your $10 or your $20 or your $50, it all compounds and makes a huge impact that keeps these cases going, keeps our work going, keeps this show going, all because of you.
Well, and Logan, think about the other things that we're involved in right now. We are fighting at the Supreme Court for Calvary Chapel, San Jose, because the Newsom administration in the government in California wants to take tithes from the people of those churches. They want to take the tithes away and put it in the coffers of the government for fines during the COVID era that have already been overturned as unconstitutional and were blocked, but they still are trying to enforce these fines. And this is 2026. This is crazy. But that's what the government in California is doing. You hear what's going on in Colorado, and that we've gotten a victory, but we still have to keep fighting. And then you see what happened in Minneapolis over the weekend. This is, it feels like a dark time. You said that yesterday, this cloud that's hanging over Minnesota. But really, you see what governments, local governments, are trying to do to churches still, and how they are trying to stop God's work going forward. And they are trying to stop them reaching out to the least of these. That is what the people like Don Lemon want to say. Churches don't even care about that. They are white supremacists. They feel so privileged. We need to make them feel uncomfortable and feel trauma. That was his message. In many cases, I guarantee you, he has no clue about what we are fighting for in Colorado. But in his mind, that's not even something that's possible for a church to be doing, because he thinks it is white supremacists that are entitled and do not like him for all these reasons. But in reality, we know what the church does, and we know it doesn't make headlines. And we know even when we talk about it on here, sometimes it doesn't pop the numbers on YouTube. It doesn't feed the algorithm. But it's important work, and it's real work. And it's stuff that we will not stop fighting for, even when the world turns away and says, that's not what they're actually doing. We'll keep fighting.
So, Cece, just to wrap up before we get there, so the next steps in this, because look, in some instances, like you said, just to you got to reset the stage. We've won.
Yep.
But the fight somehow, as always, never seems to wrap up completely.
We won. The criminal charges have been dropped, but the law still stands, so we're going after the law itself.